Retreat Centre, which is called Cloud Temple Gardens. And he's directing Earth Imagineers, alternative living consultancy, organising a Bamboo Earth Festival and producing various multimedia projects in relation to plants, culture, consciousness, love and altered states. And the title of his talk is Triptamines at the End of Time, Birthing a Spheroid Awareness. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, everyone. Hello. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I need a little bit more volume. Yeah, I feel privileged to be able to be on the earth at this time. And I'd really like to extend my gratitude to everyone who came here for this event, to the original landholders and custodians of this land for keeping the frequency so pristine for this time. And I'd like to dedicate a little bit of vibration to that. I'd like to also thank all our feathered and furry friends, the mineral kingdom, the fungi, the elemental beings, and of course the plants, mother and father, children, all. Thank you. Okay, so the original custodians of this land left us some special jewels, and some of these jewels are going to be vital at this time to be able to transgress or transport our beings gracefully to what's coming, because there's a lot of interesting changes that are going to happen faster and faster, and the more flexible we are in body, mind, spirit, the more graceful these changes will be, and the less flexible, the more freaky they'll be, and we may even end up knowing people who end up in psych wards. And so I think it's vital that we use certain tools for this time. And so the talk is obviously called Triptamines at the End of Time. But what this is about is how to shift our dimensional cognition for a more harmonic world view. And what this means is shifting a linear perspective from our cognition that we've been programmed to use from our head, which is a very Western cultural orientation, to the heart, which, as I'll show you later, is actually just like a brain in more ways than you'd like to know, or maybe you'd love to know. So there was an incredible talk on TED. There was a woman called Jill Bolte, and she studied as a neuroscientist because her brother had schizophrenia, and she got to experience a stroke in the left side of her brain, which was essentially controlling the logic center. And her logic and the way in which she cognized things fell out. And what happened was she ended up having what most of us would describe as an intense psychoactive experience. And what that means is she saw the beauty in nature. She saw the beauty all around her. She lost track of time. Space-time collapsed. And she felt incredible, blissful, and at one with everything. Now, this was just the shutting down of one side of the brain, which meant the other side of the brain, which was more responsible for intuitive, direct cognition, was rising in the mix. And this is what I speculate happens when people indulge in entheogenic journeys. Okay. So what we're looking at is kind of like a perfect storm. You know, there's rapid climate change, fluctuations in economy, politics, culture, technology, environment, swine flu, health, wealth, and psychology are leading to massive instability. And so the future prospects of conflict, division, and poverty are looming large. But what is this actually telling us? Because if we look at this as a series of coincidental events, in other words, if we use our head to look at all the different parts, it looks like we're sailing into a big storm. And in a sense it is. But if we look at it as an overall pattern of a change, much like I think I described when I spoke here last, you know, if you enter into a room and there's a woman giving birth and you didn't understand a birthing process and there was pain and blood, you may be excused to think that there was something wrong and put your energy into trying to stop it. This is the analogy of what we are trying to do, trying to stop something like climate change, because we're in a birthing process, and yet huge amounts of energy are being used or trying to be used in a covert way to take away our freedoms. And so I'm going to ask you to suspend your ideas of what you think is going on and just look at it in the context of a conscious earth and a conscious people and a plan that's been unfolding for thousands of years. I mean, the Mayans, who were talking about the rapid climate change and these changes occurring at this time, they've been talking about it for ages. You know, all of a sudden, the Western world's discovered it and, you know, it's been politicized, and all of a sudden we're looking at doom and gloom. But what I'm going to discuss tonight is how to gracefully transit this time. So, of course, that's obviously positive proof of global warming right there, because the IPCC uses that sort of information to tell us what's going on. And by the way, there's some very interesting DVD that I have, if anyone's interested in watching, of an Australian professor who outlines the case really clearly with no bias, and you get to see a much clearer picture than you're going to get in the media. Okay, so the first thing that I guess I'd have to say for each of us is, right now, is to follow your passion. Now, these are some of my passions here, growing bamboo and lotus. And if you're not doing right now in your life what you love to be doing, you may end up regretting it. So get to it. Start doing what really makes you buzz. Follow your heart. And this will lead you to where you're meant to be and what you're meant to be doing. Okay, so I started to talk about global climate change and the flowering of human consciousness. And in essence, love is all there really is. And if you look at it in the right way, you'll actually see that this is the greatest opportunity that humans as a mass consciousness have had in a long time to awaken. And I believe there's a lot of information that global climate change is occurring on every planet in our solar system where there isn't anthropogenic means, as far as I know. Okay, so I'm going to start kind of at the end with a perspective of time. And I don't know if you can read that from there, so I'll read it to you. It says, "Our true inner purpose is to awaken to the timeless nature of being. Then each moment of doing unfolds before us. Without the burden of effort, success, failure, or obscurity, awakening exposes time for what it is, the ego's flimsy construct and illusory constraint. Time is the looking glass through which we step when ready to embrace infinity." Okay, so what have we got? We've got the most advanced technology ever created. And some may ask, well, what is that technology? And what it actually is if you draw all of our technologies, if you can see they're all converging. And if you draw where they actually converge to, you'll see transport and telephony and all our technologies will join up in a biotech wetware, which is called the human body. Because if you take telephony to its nth degree, you end up with telepathy. And we know that as humans, this is already our birthright. There are people who communicate telepathically, and I'm sure most people here are communicating telepathically on some level without realizing it. So we know that this is part of the body. It's just, how do we get the instruction manuals? How do we train ourselves to be able to teleport, to be able to bilocate or to use telepathy? Because surely if we have telepathy, we're not going to need to spend billions on driving ourselves around and exploring space. So this is possibly something that the children coming onto the planet at the moment are ready to start teaching. And so the tools that I have to offer are quite simple shifts of perception. And in this case, planting the seeds of spherical consciousness. I'm going to outline a quick idea of the way in which we cognize the earth at present from a Western cultural perspective and how we could shift that. Now, for those of you who may have been here at the earlier panel, I used a description of this event being incredible because this event was chosen to be directly over the center of the earth, which is a magical and fantastic thing. And if the earth was flat, there would only be one place on earth where that spot was. But because it's spherical, it means there is no place on earth that is not directly over the center of the earth. Now imagine the center of the earth was a divine being. Let's call it God for simplicity's sake. And it was transparent, and one day you looked down and you went, oh wow, God is right here. I found God. You'd call over to your Muslim brother, oi, this way, look, I found God right here. And he's going, no. I have the path to God. This is the shortest path right here. And of course your Jewish brother over there, he's going, no, you don't understand. You guys can't have the shortest path. I've got the shortest path because I can see it. This is it. And of course in a sphere, there is no path that is not the shortest path to the divine. And so what that means is each one of us is the same, and yet each one of us is different. And how do we manage to compute this? Because the brain, the mind, only can grapple with one of those concepts at a time, just like computer language. It's a 0 or it's a 1. It's either this or that, black and white. It can't be both at the same time. And yet there is a brain in the heart that can cognize all the gradations in between, from black to white and an infinite number of shades of grey in between. And so as we shift to that heartfelt perception, we'll come to see how we are actually part of nature. And we'll see that there's also cultures around here that have been doing this for thousands of years, waiting for us to reconnect through them back to this way of being. And I'm going to go into that in a minute. I'm just going to read to you a part of a text from the Chandogya Upanishad, which is about 6,000 years old. It says, in the center of the castle of Brahman, our own body, there's a small shrine in the form of a lotus flower, and within it can be found a small space. We should find who dwells there, and we should want to know him. And if anyone asks, who is he who lives in a small shrine in the form of a lotus flower in the center of the castle of Brahman, we can answer, the little space within the heart is as great as the universe. The heaven and the earth are there, the sun, the moon, the stars, fire and lightning, and the winds. For the whole universe is in him, and he dwells within our hearts. Now this is kind of a conundrum, because that means if the whole of the universe is within our heart, it means all of this is just a mirror. Which means if we want to change this, it's the same as trying to change your reflection in the mirror. If you want the reflection in the mirror to have combed hair, you don't try and comb the mirror, do you? You comb your hair and the mirror changes. And so with this shift of perspective, we get to see that if we want change in the world, we should quit trying to change the reflection, quit trying to change each other, and quit having wars on drugs and poverty and anything else we can think of. So the scientific view looks at everything in parts. It looks at the world in something that's called mechanomorphism, which means it looks at the world as a machine with a number of parts. And so something like the heart becomes a pump. And basically, Osho gave an incredible example. He said, this view of the world doesn't work for nature. If you take a turtle, you've got one turtle and you cut it in half. You've got two halves of a turtle. But if you try to put those two halves together, do you still have a turtle? No, you don't. And so we get to see that the mathematics doesn't describe life. In fact, if you hold a seed, within that seed there's a portal. And let's say that's a lotus seed. There's an infinite number of lotus plants within that seed. And so 1 equals infinity. How does that compute? Okay, so biognosis is the process of viewing the world from a natural, pure perspective. The understandings that can be gained through this ancient mode of cognition exceed anything we now call science can or will discover or articulate about who or what human beings are, or the world which they are part of. And so that's what Harold Boone said. This type of cognition can be applied to anything. The medicinal use of plants, understanding living reality of damaged organ systems, from farming to the interrelationship of mycelial fungi and trees, from the intelligence of whales to the interconnected functioning of ecosystems. And so I'm going to give you a couple of examples in history of how people have actually used this. Now, a long time ago, I think it was in the 20s, there were these, the guy standing at the back and the woman on the left, that is Leadbeater and Besant, and in front there's Krishnamurti. And basically, these guys went to India and learned a form of meditation technique. And what they managed to do was go into the subatomic world, and they drew diagrams of what atoms looked like. And of course, at the time, people said, you must be crazy. A, we don't know what they look like. And B, you know, how could anyone see anything? And it was only in the early 90s when they really started to get a feel of what atomic structure really looked like did they validate this work. So this is what old world cultures have been doing for thousands of years. You know, when ethnobotanists go into the Amazon and they ask the locals, well, how did you get such a large pharmacopoeia from this jungle? You know, trial and error. Of course, the best case is curare, because with curare, which is a poison that they use to hunt with, when it gets in your bloodstream, you die almost instantly. But if you eat it, it's harmless. And so, of course, this is an incredible tool. The problem is, when you're making curare, if you breathe it in, you die almost instantly. So how could this have been of trial and error? This was a botanist's conundrum. And yet, when they asked the local people, and there's lots of different types of curare made in the Amazon, they said, how did you discover that? They said, oh, it was a gift from the spirits, or a gift from the gods. And scientists couldn't understand that. They were like, yeah, well, you guys obviously have forgotten, you know. But this is how people are actually getting information. They are going and communing with plants and animals. And this is what I'm suggesting, what the things like tryptamines are actually for as tools. But they're not necessarily to be used constantly to access this information. What they're actually meant to be used is to re-track us back into the natural senses that we already have within our body to do this. And so there's a subtle and yet really potent difference, because if you become dependent on being able to perceive the world with direct perception through something that you have to extract that's illegal, I'd say you're in a bit of trouble. So see these as training wheels. Another good example is remote viewing. Now, the interesting thing about remote viewing, and I think this is something anyone can go and Google and research, there's been documentary films, and there's been an American military program with remote viewing. In fact, there was a guy called Inigo Schwan who went to Mars and said, hey, this is what you guys are going to find when you send up a Mars probe. And NASA was like, yeah, right. And of course, years later, when they did send up a Mars probe and found exactly what he predicted, all of a sudden we're really interested in what he had to say. And so they asked him to find a military base in the Pacific Ocean that wasn't even on a map. Not only did he go to the military base, tell them what the weather was like, describe the barracks, he said, anyone can do this. And it freaked them out, because they thought, oh, the Russians, they're going to get onto it. So they developed a military program of remote viewing where they actually went out and started training people with this natural innate ability to remote view. The problem was, once these guys went home and they had the skills, what was to stop them, going to visit the moon or going to check out some other dimension? Because you not only can travel in space, you can travel back in time. And they had a very large attrition of people, simply because all their guys that were arriving there were going, hey, I tried to leave the Earth realm and bumped into a whole bunch of beings which said I couldn't leave. And can you explain what's going on? And these guys were ending up either in psych wards or going, geez, I don't know what I'm doing for the military. There's a much bigger picture out there. And so that program kind of had to go underground. But this is an ability that each one of us has. Okay. So now a lot of what we're dealing with in the world today that we look at as quite bad, like this climate change or like swine flu, are actually symptoms. And what we really need to be looking at is root causes. And what we really need to look at is an approach to whole systems. And this is where the heart comes in. So accessing the subconscious becomes vital. So like that woman, Jill Bolte, she managed to turn off the aspect of her brain, which was her logic and her ego, which was driving her cognition, and tune into a more primitive brain, and yet a way more powerful and way more accurate brain. The reason I've put in what is 2012 is because the eschaton, or this event that people can kind of feel, whether it's actually going to occur 2012 or not, but that we can feel is looming down on us. This event is akin to coming to the void. But the void is actually just our subconscious. It's just the 99% of our awareness that's going on that we, as awake beings, are not aware of. For example, that your heart's beating, that your chest is breathing, that your food is digesting. How many of us are aware of all of these things, and yet they're going on some form of conscious level? So what I feel is going to occur is, as we become more and more privy to this, and the people who've been ingesting entheogens are getting a little snapshot view of what is going to be coming up for us in reality, they're going to go, oh, well, yeah, I'm kind of used to this realm, but imagine people who have no idea when beings or strange buildings or landscapes start shifting. Okay. So I'm going to move on to how we actually approach this old and yet to some of us very new way of cognition. Catalysts are crucial. Initiation is imperative. Context is vital. practice is necessary. Heart coherence is a must, and being is just so. Through this process of catalysts, which, as I mentioned earlier, can be somogenic or somagetic. If you can drive the catalysts in your body through forms of meditation, yoga, tantra, climbing mountains, whatever can get you to start channeling prana through your body and awaken more, do it. Those are the somogenics. And this is our true nature. This is what the somagetics, or what we're calling entheogens, are placed in the environment to do. They are to kickstart us and to give us the instruction manual on how to move energy in our body and how to heal. Okay. So, there we go. There's some catalysts for you. So this was a vehicle, a little moped I saw in Bali. I couldn't resist. The bottom one says, superior quality peyote, hallucinogen, and dependable psilocybin mushrooms. And of course, we have to remember that these are just the vehicle. Without us driving the vehicle, you're not going to get there. So the entheogens are used as a tool, and we have to be able to extract vital information from these dimensions and bring them back to this so-called reality to enrich our lives. Because surely if they enrich our lives, then by natural osmosis they'll enrich other people's lives. And so the process is constantly moving inwards. Remember, don't try and adjust the reflection in the mirror. Okay, so initiation. Most, for anyone who was here for my talk a couple of years ago, which was on the nature of addiction, I discussed that each of what we call a drug has its own initiatory potency. And it doesn't matter whether it's cocaine or opium or LSD. What these things are doing are introducing us to aspects of ourselves that we don't know, that we can't even recognize. And as we learn to love and accept them, the context of that is that if we realize that this is truly ourselves and these things are just catalysts, then it opens up an initiation and a pathway for us to learn about how to use our bodies. Because as these changes come on harder and faster, we may not have, or we may not need to have access to these entheogens, because we will learn how to generate them in our body. So once you learn how to do it, the next thing is practice. I mean, anyone who's looked at any of the scientific information that's available at the moment on neuroplasticity will realize that the idea that we were sold as kids at school, that you get a certain number of brain cells, and then as you start taking alcohol or drugs, or they start diminishing, and slowly they deteriorate and you end up with nothing. Well, guess what? That's a lot of crap. You can generate brain cells at any age. And so neuroplasticity, when we practice, what happens is it builds up neural pathways. And as we build up more and more neural pathways, this becomes our second nature. And this is what practice is all about. So getting it, understanding, having a realization is just the beginning. Then we have to practice what it is that has shown us until it becomes our second nature. Okay, so seeds and tools, and the sacred nectar gatherers. What I'm proposing is being able to identify what it is out there in these so-called realms that we're looking for. Now, I've heard a lot of interesting talk since I've been here this time about schizophrenia and about other entities and fractals and colored patterns, and so what? If it doesn't have a meaning and cannot enrich your life here on earth today, it's just entertainment. And so the role of healer, shaman, artist is to go to the edge of what we may call reality, to the void, to these altered dimensions and spaces, to witness what is there. And often this is beyond words, which is why we have art, because we come back and we sing this, we paint this, we talk about it in a way that describes it, but can never truly describe it, because this is pure vibration we're talking about. And so as a human being, our role is to anchor this sort of energy on earth now through our bodies. So we, like a musician is training themselves to play a flute. When the music comes through them, they are not playing. They are just expressing what is coming through them. And they're acting as a bridge or a portal. And that is what our role is going to be. And the heart is at the heart of that. So our measure of success is going to be the ability to trap living solar energy and use that to enrich all life on earth. So the models that we have, and we discussed this in the panel earlier, are plants. We've got this incredible, intimate, integrated relationship with the plant world, and those who don't realize it, you know, that they're eating plant matter every day. Even if you're eating animals, it's higher levels of processed plant. Plants are the beings that trap sunlight and make physical form. And they don't only make sugars and fuel and fiber for our clothes. They make beautiful medicines. And the entheogens are medicines of high vibration, because all illness comes from our misalignment of how we see the world to how it truly is. And so if we can find tools that enable us to see clearly, to clean that mirror, then our seeming ills will just fade away. And so this is how a lot of the Amazonian shamans are healing with ayahuasca. They're not healing necessarily on a direct level. They're healing an energetic schism in the way in which we see the world that is not in a harmonic coherence with who we truly are. So, the threshold of mass and size of Earth has been reached, modulated by the forces of light and dark, and the coordinated, dare I say, orchestrated growth was and still is modulated by the beings of light, our plant brothers and sisters, as they download the light of sun and an infinite stars into useful plant sugars, supplying food, shelter, fuel, medicine, and the instruction manual for the end of time. This is what's occurring now. So once we have this stuff, whatever that is, we've got to learn how to share, because part of what being in this dimension is about is how we share. So cooperation and collaboration create abundance, synergy, economies of scale and scope. The reason people didn't live on their own and lived in groups is because anyone who knows, if you've lived in a shared house, if there are 4 or 5 people, one person can be cooking, one person can be doing the dishes, 2 other people can be relaxing or working, and as it rotates, you get these incredible economies of scale. So imagine that started to expand into whole tribes. You end up with huge amounts of time. So when there's abundance, this is the seed of culture. And when there's poverty, which is what the Western world is steeped in now, although they don't know it because they're sitting in front of a huge new LCD screen with a pickup in the driveway, they think they're still wealthy. But they're so poor they don't have enough leisure to even look after their health or know who they are. And so our culture is actually really poor and has no time to even be called culture. So when do we become tools of nature? When do we assume our true roles of guardians of Earth and stop using nature as a tool? So triptamines as tools. What do we learn and how do we practice? This is a really interesting and intimate question, not only for this conference, but for this time. Because if we learn how to use these tryptamines effectively, we get to navigate a very clear path so that when things do start shifting even more rapidly than they are now, we get to go gracefully. So I mentioned earlier the two main pathways of stimulating this. Somogenics being the somas, or the blissful nectars being generated in the body by the organ systems, and somagetics being using external so-called chemicals to put into our bodies to stimulate the production of these. Sometimes they're called neurotransmitters, sometimes they're called hormones, sometimes they're called vitamins. These are all just names for bodily processes and liquids, which I'm going to go into. Now, I had a series of ayahuasca visions a few years ago where I was taken into each organ in the body, including the skin, and shown how each one, when it vibrates to a particular frequency and comes into harmony with the other organs, it produces a dewdrop, like a drop of nectar. And as that drop forms, you experience no less than a bodily orgasm. Now, this can happen with each organ in the body. However, the ancient science of generating these dewdrops for each organ, blending them all together, and sitting back in that is what awakening to our true nature is about. And the somagetics are to help us remember. So when we have something like MDMA, and it makes us feel the full emotional spectrum of what we can feel, then we go, okay, wow, this is what I'm capable of feeling. If you point the finger and go, oh, well, that's the drug making me do that, you miss it. Okay, so the power of choice. Each thought, action, belief, and emotion creates everything we're doing, everything we're thinking, every belief is creating consequences on a moment-to-moment level. And I'm going to try and elucidate how that actually happens within the body. Heart, blood, spit, and orgasmic fluids. Okay, so I read about a scientific experiment recently, and I do not condone experimenting on animals, but what these scientists had done was taken some guinea pigs, and they took saliva from people who were really angry, and they put it on these guinea pigs, and it made some of them sick, and in fact it killed some of them. They then took saliva from people who seemed to be normal and rested, and they put it on the guinea pigs, no change. They then took saliva from people who were really loving and happy and high, and this acted as an actual medicine. So here we have the exact same fluid, saliva, from a human subject, and yet on one level it's killing, and on another level, on the other end of the spectrum, it's medicine. So each one of our body fluids, be it our piss, or our sweat, or our semen, or our female ejaculation fluid, each one is constantly changing and upgrading moment by moment to be super conscious medicine, or possibly even poison. And if we look at some of the old world cultures, how they used blood in ritual. For example, the Maya or the Aborigines would take blood from the tongue or blood from the penis, because that was where the source of creation came out of the mouth for creating dream worlds, and from the penis for creating physical worlds. And so they would use blood from that place in ritual. And blood has a very magical process within the body. And as was discussed earlier, our blood is only one molecule different from chlorophyll. Now, at the center of our blood molecule is iron. And what that does, what iron does, is iron records bioelectromagnetic information. Now, I think I may have mentioned this last time. There used to be things called 4-track and 8-track tapes. And what that is a piece of cellophane with rust on it. And what happens is, to record music, your recording head aligns the molecules of rust on the cellophane. And when you come over the playback head, the alignment of those rust molecules plays the music. Now this is what our blood is doing all the time. And the electromagnetic signals are coming from out here, are being modulated by our mudras, how we stand, what we think. In other words, the shape of our subtle body changes permeability with what we think, what we say, how we sit. Everything is a form of yoga, and as we change the shape of this aerial, it changes the frequency of ourselves and of the signals that we receive. And so we're in a sea of bioelectromagnetic information. Our blood is picking it up all the time, but our organs are the recording and playback heads. And our heart may record compassion, among many other things. And our kidneys may record fear. And so each organ is determining the level of input of fear and the level of output of fear. And not only is that coming out as a vibration, it's coming out, like I said, in our blood, in our pee, in our spit, in our sweat. And so a lot of the old world cultures knew this, and to amplify the signal, they took ochre, which is basically rust with clay, and put it on their bodies to amplify these signals and dance in the electromagnetic fields. And the original people of this country would put emu feathers in specific patterns along the lines in their body, because the emu feather has blood at its base and would actually create this extra needle of charge. They could even be more sensitized to the field. Maybe about 15? With question time? Okay, sorry, I'll speed up. Okay, so that was the body as a multi-track recording and playback system. I'm going to talk a little bit about the heart. The first cells that form after conception is a small ball of cells, and then you get 2 from mitosis, then 4, then 8. And basically at about 512 cells, you get like a torus, like this, which is like a donut, which is like that blood cell that you saw. And what that does is it's an amazing shape around, that's the shape of the field around our body and the earth and our solar system, and almost all living systems have the shape of this field. But what happens is this becomes the human heart. So at one stage in time, each one of us, before we were anything else, was a human heart. And then the next part that grew was actually the tip of the tongue. And so what we find is that the heart is 60 to 65% neural cells. In fact, it's a little brain. And what that does is it actually puts out electromagnetic signals and takes in electromagnetic signals. And it's hardwired from the brain to the heart in such a way that information passes seamlessly. There's no gates. And this is in the back of the subconscious. There's a communication going all the time. But if you want to do that manually, then you actually put the tip of the tongue on the top of the mouth, and then you create the circuit. So this is the conscious joining, and this is the unconscious joining that's working all the time. I'm going to skip through some stuff because I didn't realize how much time I actually had. So this is Victor Schauberger, who looked at all these incredible spirals, and what we found now is that all the veins and all the arteries are actually spiraled, and the blood actually breaks into spirals into the body, and it's the blood that pumps the heart, not the heart that pumps blood. And there's many really interesting facts about the heart. That there's 7 layers of heart muscle, each at an exact angle of the prism of light, and so we get a rainbow heart. The heart, all the heart cells are coherent, and if you take one heart cell and put it on its own, it starts to fibrillate, which means it starts to beat out of rhythm. And you take one other heart cell and you put it together and they'll sync up, even though they're not touching. And this is what's happening between us all the time and between nature. Okay, I'm going to skip that slide. Expanding Earth and expanding awareness. Google expanding Earth and you'll see all sorts of incredible videos on how Earth is growing day by day. And when it reaches a threshold, bang. Okay, so digital motion technology, or DMT, which we're going to choose. The DMT is obviously the endogenous hormone of light. The tryptamines are a catalyst for this process by showing us a glimpse of the ancient, familiar, natural harmonic sense of cognition. So the big question is, how do we love all of the children of all species for all time? And basically, what we have to do is develop right relationship. So what the Aboriginal people, or the original people of this land, have as a gift for us is how to relate. So we have the two modes. From a Western cultural perspective, we think we own the land, and so we have rights. And a lot of these old world cultures, they are custodians, stewards, and so they have responsibilities. Now this ties across all boards, from the way we relate to the land to the way we relate to our lovers. If we think we own that person, all of a sudden the relationship will start to move into codependency and fall apart. So how do we move from ownership to custodians and stewards? So this is encoded in the most advanced culture on Earth, which are, I believe, the original people of this Earth, who already have encoded within them kinship law and stewardship, which is right relationship with the land, right relationship with each other, and of course right relationship with self, which creates a very specific awareness. And how do you know an advanced culture? Longevity, how long has it been around? How internalized their technology is, like I was talking about, telepathy. How in harmony they are with their environment. So these get to show you what the rule of thumb is, what the yardstick is to see what an advanced culture looks like. So this is how it plays out for us. If we're relating to the Earth properly, these are the sort of things that should be occurring. More biodiversity, more fertile soils, more productive gardens, more healthy ecosystems. If these aren't happening, we're in wrong relationship to the Earth. So have a look at that list and just remember that if this isn't going on, we're in wrong relationship. Okay. So, right relationship between you and your partner. These are the things that it should look like. This is what should continue to happen. And I'm not going to read the list because I am running out of time, and I'm assuming that you can read that. Is that correct? Okay. So if you're in right relationship with your community, this is what it's going to look like. Celebrated diversity. It's going to be self-sufficient. Things are going to be localized. Have a look at that list. Okay. So what we've got to do is we've got to incorporate culture into the architecture and landscape and diversify our incomes, our habitat, our microclimates. In basic, we need to create diversity. Okay, we need to honor the ecology, the elders' wisdom, the children. Increase wildlife habitat by linking to more of itself, nurturing diversity in ecology, community, and economy. And these will buffer us against the rapid changes that are about to occur. And so the peak of creative culture is temple building. And I'm not talking necessarily about edifices. A feature film is a temple. A music album is a temple. The collaborative, combined vision of people to create something like an event like this is a temple. And I believe we're going to have a sonic temple later. Okay. So then